Hello, basketball people, we have news. Let's go to more news about the Golden State Warriors. I ask you to give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, as I am a Warriors fan. The Warriors need to think about the future and begin rebuilding the team, focusing on young players with potential. Jalen Tyson is a unique player who would be a perfect fit for the Warriors if the Cleveland Cavaliers agree to trade him. At 6 feet 4 inches and 215 pounds, Tyson is a versatile player with excellent scoring, averaging 19.6 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 3.5 assists during his final college season in California. After being eliminated in the second round of the playoffs last season, the Golden State Warriors entered the NBA offseason looking to upgrade their roster to chase a championship this season. Of course, the Warriors looked like a title contender after acquiring Jimmy Butler at the trade deadline last season, but after upsetting the Houston Rockets in the first round, an untimely injury to Stephen Curry ultimately led to them being eliminated by the Minnesota Timberwolves. 10 plays of the week. Because of this, Golden State entered the offseason looking for ways to bolster their rotation around their star trio, but that has not been the case thus far as they continue to await a decision by restricted free agent Jonathan Kuminga. Despite this, it has been reported that the Warriors do have deals in place with multiple free agents that are expected to be finalized once Kuminga's situation is resolved. Warriors predicted to acquire Cavaliers' Jalen Tyson. While that may be the case, Golden State could also look at other ways to upgrade their roster this offseason, and Bleacher Report's Zach Buckley recently released a mock trade that has the Warriors landing a young two-way wing from the Cleveland Cavaliers. In the trade, the Warriors would send Tracy Jackson-Davis and a lottery-protected 2026 first-round pick to the Cavaliers in exchange for Jalen Tyson. This would be an interesting trade for Golden State to make, especially since they would be giving up one of the few centers on their roster, though it could work out for them if they do end up landing Al Horford in free agency. For Tyson, he was the 20th overall pick by the Cavaliers in the 2024 draft, though he did not see a ton of playing time last season as he averaged only 9.6 minutes per game over 47 contests. In those 47 games, the 22-year-old guard averaged 3.6 points, 2.0 rebounds, and 0.9 assists per game while shooting 43% from the field and 34.5% from three. Tyson is a solid scorer and defender who would be a major upgrade to the Warriors' backcourt depth, and he would also likely receive more minutes in Golden State this season than he would in Cleveland. Despite this, the Warriors may hold off on making this trade since they would have to move one of the few big men on their roster, and Cavaliers may also hold off as they could view Tyson as a key player for their future due to his age. Should the Warriors just offer Jonathan Kuminga more money? More money, more fewer problems. For weeks now, Jonathan Kuminga has been threatening to take the qualifying offer. He's repeatedly rejected the best offer on the table from the Golden State Warriors, which is reportedly 2 years and $45 million, with a team option for the second year. He has no chance of signing outright elsewhere, as no one can absorb the money he's trying to make. And it sure doesn't seem like a sign-and-trade is in the works. Which means Kuminga is left with just two options: sign a new deal with the Dubs, which has a million different iterations, or sacrifice millions of dollars to take the qualifying offer, and re-enter free agency next offseason without restrictions. I believe Kuminga's flirtation with the qualifying offer, which he can sign anytime between now and October 1st, is earnest, and not just a negotiation ploy. But the more I think about it, the more I realize just how bad it would be for Golden State if the fifth-year wing goes in that direction. In the short term, Kuminga taking the 1-year, $7.9 million deal would be good for the Dubs. They'd get to retain a player they still like, despite all the noise, without having to pay him the price he deserves. But if Kuminga takes the qualifying offer, it essentially assures two things: 2026-27 will be his final year in a Warriors jersey, and Golden State won't get anything of note for him in a trade. The Dubs can live with either one of those realities, but not both of them. No, the Warriors need Kuminga on a larger contract, and we've seen proof of this concept before. When Kevin Durant decided to leave, the Warriors executed a sign-and-trade for D'Angelo Russell, a player they otherwise would have had zero interest in. There were even reports that the Warriors may have met Russell's initial contract request with an increased salary, so as to facilitate a trade for a star. A few months later, Russell's contract was used to trade for Andrew Wiggins, and a few years later, Wiggins was used to acquire Jimmy Butler III. In that regard, the Warriors need Kuminga. They still believe that he has a chance to turn into a foundational player, and if he doesn't, then they need to have a star-priced contract to build a trade around, or else they'll be met with a highly disappointing return. So why don't they simply offer him more money, or at least the security he's craving? Keep the financial terms, but tack on a third year and remove the team options. Would it really be so bad to re-sign Kuminga for 3 years and $70 million without any way out? The Dubs aren't going to have financial flexibility anytime soon anyway, so the only one really hurt by an overpay is Joe Lacob, who is probably the highest on Kuminga of anyone in the front office. But of course, it's not quite that simple. The lack of league-wide interest in JK this offseason might have the team a little scared that he wouldn't be tradable down the line. And overpaying just because is not a precedent that owners like to set with their GMs, nor one that GMs like to set with agents. And while it's easy to armchair GM a good contract, there's a decent chance that Kuminga would still have no interest in the framework laid out above. It's also quite possible that the Warriors are just playing hardball. They have a lot of leverage knowing that Kuminga would be sacrificing 8 figures this year if he took the qualifying offer, with no guarantee that he'd be able to make it up next summer. Even if they're comfortable paying him more, they could be waiting until he's closer to having his back up against the wall to see if he blinks before they up their offer. We probably won't have a resolution for a while, and there are legitimate reasons for that. But there are also legitimate reasons for thinking the Warriors should just pull out their big kid checkbook and offer Kuminga a better deal. They need him more than they're letting on. Why Jonathan Kuminga has brought the Warriors to a standstill. Minneapolis, Minnesota, May 14. Jonathan Kuminga number 00 of the Golden State Warriors handles the ball during the first quarter of Game 5 of the Western Conference second-round NBA playoffs against the Minnesota Timberwolves at Target Center on May 14, 2025 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Note to user expressly acknowledges and agrees that, by downloading and/or using this photograph, user is consenting to the terms and conditions of the Getty Images license agreement. Photo by Ellen Schmidt/Getty Images. More. NBA training camps open in less than 1 month, and the Golden State Warriors still have only 9 players signed to standard contracts. While most teams need to fill 1 or 2 more roster spots between now and the start of the season, the Warriors have to sign at least 5 more players. For now, the Warriors are the only team that has yet to sign a single player this offseason. They have their ongoing restricted free agency standoff with Jonathan Kuminga to thank for that. At the moment, the Warriors are roughly $25.0 million below the $195.9 million first apron and nearly $36.9 million below the $207.8 million second apron. Kuminga is the first domino that needs to fall before they fill out the remainder of the roster. According to ESPN's Shams Charania and Anthony Slater, the Warriors have offered Kuminga a 2-year, $45 million contract, but he's shown little interest in accepting it. That's due in large part to the Warriors' insistence on having a team option for the second season and their unwillingness to let him maintain the built-in no-trade clause, they added. If Kuminga eventually relents and takes that deal, he'll have a starting salary of $21.75 million, according to Sam Amick of The Athletic. That would leave the Warriors less than $15.2 million below the second apron with 5 open roster spots. That's where things could get tricky. If the Warriors sign Kuminga to that 2-year, $45 million deal, they'd go over the first apron after rounding out the rest of their roster. That would limit them to the $5.7 million taxpayer mid-level exception rather than the $14.1 million non-taxpayer MLE that teams get when they're below the first apron. When the Warriors spend the taxpayer MLE, longtime Boston Celtics center Al Horford is their reported target with that exception, they'll become hard-capped at the second apron. That means they won't allowed to have more than $207.8 million in salary on their books at any point between now and June 30th under any circumstance. Forbes Daily. Join over 1 million Forbes Daily subscribers and get our best stories, exclusive reporting, and essential analysis of the day's news in your inbox every weekday. Let's reverse engineer the Warriors' salary sheet to show why Kuminga's negotiations take priority before they commit to spending their full taxpayer MLE. The Warriors currently have $170.5 million in salary on their books. If they spend the taxpayer MLE on Horford and then round out the rest of their roster with 5 veteran minimum contracts, $2.3 million each, they'd be up to nearly $187.7 million in total salary. That would leave them less than $20.2 million below the second apron, which they could not cross since they'd be hard-capped after using the taxpayer MLE. The starting salary of their current offer to Kuminga is more than $21.7 million. See why that's problematic? Granted, the Warriors don't have to fill their entire roster by opening night. A growing number of teams have started to leave one roster spot open to maintain additional flexibility for in-season moves. The veteran minimum exception also begins to prorate downward once the season begins, so the Warriors could just wait to fill their 15th roster spot until they could squeeze in a final minimum deal while staying under the second apron. However, if they hard-capped themselves by using the taxpayer MLE before resolving Kuminga's future, they'd leave themselves at risk of getting poached. The Brooklyn Nets are the only team with cap space at the moment, but they could decide to give Kuminga an offer sheet if the Warriors were limited in how much they could match. Either way, those looming hard cap issues might dissuade the Warriors from increasing their offer to Kuminga. If Kuminga refuses to take the Warriors' 2-year, $45 million contract, he does have a nuclear option in his back pocket. He could instead accept his 1-year, $7.9 million qualifying offer, which would give him full veto rights on any trade this coming season and make him an unrestricted free agent in 2026. However, he'd be giving up nearly $14 million this year by doing so. Kuminga has until October 1st to accept his qualifying offer, so this standoff may continue for the next few weeks. Pressure will begin to rise once training camps open in late September, though. Both sides have real incentive to find a compromise, as Kuminga's next contract will be the Warriors' lifeline to a future major trade, while Kuminga presumably doesn't want to punt away $14 million. If cooler heads don't prevail and Kuminga does take his qualifying offer, the Warriors would have nearly $178.5 million on their books before filling out the rest of their roster. That still wouldn't leave them enough space under the first apron to spend the full non-taxpayer MLE, but they'd have more than $12 million in wiggle room under the second apron after spending the taxpayer MLE and signing 5 players to minimum contracts. Depending how frisky the Warriors were feeling, they could even use a portion of the non-taxpayer MLE to pay Horford more than the taxpayer MLE or give slight raises to the players whom they're signing to minimum deals. However, that would hard-cap them at the first apron rather than the second, which would greatly limit their rest-of-season flexibility. Strictly from a hard-cap perspective, Kuminga taking his qualifying offer would be optimal for the Warriors. They wouldn't have to time the rest of their signings to ensure they stay far enough below the second apron to make additional moves as needed. However, they'd be a virtual lock to lose Kuminga for nothing as an unrestricted free agent if he does pick up his qualifying offer, which would hardly be ideal. The Warriors should thus want to avoid the nuclear option of Kuminga picking up his qualifying offer, even if it would simplify their lives from a financial standpoint. It's worth jumping through a few extra hard cap hoops if it means Kuminga doesn't leave them empty-handed next offseason.